Welcome to Monk's Temple. Find a comfortable position. Not too rigid, not too collapsed. Just present. If you're driving right now, please save this for later. If you're lying in bed, perfect. If you're sitting at your desk after a long day, also perfect. Wherever you are, you've arrived exactly where you need to be. Let me ask you something that might sound strange. When you look at your hand right now, just take a moment and actually look at it. Where does your hand end and the rest of the world begin? Seems obvious, right? There's the boundary of your skin. That's where you stop and everything else starts. But here's the thing, that skin you're touching. It's made of the same atoms that once floated through ancient stars. The oxygen in your blood right now was probably exhaled by a pine tree somewhere in Canada last week. The water in your cells has been circulating on this planet for billions of years, passing through dinosaurs, through rivers, through clouds, through your great-great-grandparents. So where, really, is the boundary? This question, this simple, innocent question, is the doorway into one of the most misunderstood, most profound, and most life-altering teachings in all of human history. The Buddha called it śūnyatā. Emptiness. Now, before your brain starts conjuring images of nihilism or nothingness or some depressing void where nothing matters, let me stop you right there. That's not what this is. Emptiness, when understood correctly, doesn't make life meaningless. It makes life infinitely more meaningful. It doesn't take things away from you. It gives you everything. But I have to be honest with you, and this is important. The great philosopher Nagarjuna once wrote that emptiness, when grasped wrongly, can destroy a person. Like picking up a venomous snake the wrong way. So we're going to handle this carefully. We're going to approach it from angles that might surprise you. We're going to take our time. 3 hours. That's what we have together. 3 hours to slowly, gently, thoroughly explore what it means when the Buddha said that the world is empty. 3 hours that might change how you see everything. Including yourself. So take a deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. This is Monk's Temple, and you're home. Let me tell you a story that actually happened. About 12 years ago, I was living in a small apartment in Chicago. Cold winter. The kind of cold that makes your face hurt. I had a neighbor named Marcus, a retired postal worker in his 70s. Marcus had worked for the post office for 34 years. Same route every day. Same houses. Same dogs barking at him. Same families waving from their porches. He knew everyone's name, knew when their kids graduated, knew when someone was sick. Then he retired. And suddenly, Marcus didn't know who he was anymore. I'd run into him in the hallway, and he'd look at me with this confused expression, like he was trying to place a face from a dream. I don't know what to do with myself, he told me once. For 34 years, I was the mailman. Everyone knew me as the mailman. Now I'm just nothing. I'm nobody. He started sleeping later and later. Then he stopped leaving his apartment at all. His daughter would come by with groceries, and he'd barely open the door. The man who had walked 6 miles every day for 34 years was now a ghost in his own home. One night, the heat went out in the building. Middle of January. Everyone was complaining in the hallway, bundled in coats, waiting for the super to fix it. And there was Marcus, standing at the end of the hall in his bathrobe, just staring at the wall. I walked over to him. "You okay, Marcus?" He didn't look at me. He just pointed at the floor. "Look," he said. I looked down. There was a faint shadow cast by the emergency light behind us. My shadow. His shadow. They stretched down the hallway, blending into each other. "See that?" he said. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. All those years, I thought I was casting my own shadow. But I was just part of everyone else's. Now they're gone, and I don't have a shadow of my own. And here's the thing, Marcus was wrong. But he was also right. He was wrong because he'd always had a shadow. He was right because he'd spent 34 years mistaking his reflection in other people's eyes for his own existence. What Marcus was experiencing, this profound sense of having lost himself, is the first doorway into understanding emptiness. Because here's the question: who was Marcus before he became the mailman? Who was he after he stopped being the mailman? Was there ever a Marcus that existed independently of all the roles, the relationships, the routines? The Buddha would say no. And this isn't depressing. This is liberation. Before we go deeper into Marcus's story and what it reveals about the nature of who we really are, I want to take just a moment. If what you're hearing is resonating, if there's a part of you that senses there's something more to understand about yourself and this strange experience of being alive, consider subscribing to Monk's Temple. We create content like this every week, long-form explorations of the teachings that actually matter. No clickbait. No shallow takeaways. Just real depth. Hit the subscribe button, and if you'd like notifications, click the bell. This helps us continue doing this work. Now, let's return to Marcus and the mystery of the self that isn't there. So Marcus felt like he'd disappeared when he lost his job. And most of us would say, well, Marcus, you're still you. The mailman was just a role. The real you is still there. But what is the real you? Let's do something together. Close your eyes for a moment, or if you're watching, just soften your gaze. I want you to try to locate yourself. Not your body. Not your thoughts. Not your memories. Just you. The one who's experiencing all of this. Where is that? If you look for it, really look, you might notice something strange. The harder you search for a solid, unchanging you, the more it seems to slip through your fingers. Your thoughts keep changing. Your body keeps changing. Your opinions from 10 years ago might embarrass you now. Your memories fade and warp. Even your personality shifts depending on who you're with. So where is this solid self that we all assume exists? The Buddha used a powerful analogy. He said our sense of self is like a musical performance. Think about it. When you hear a piece of music, what is it? It's not the musician can change. It's not the instrument can be replaced. It's not the individual notes, they come and go. Music exists as a relationship between all these things. It's a process, not a thing. You are the same way. Let's break this down with something more concrete. Right now, you're watching this video. There's an experience happening. But let's examine what's actually going on. Light enters your eyes. That light carries information that hits your retina, gets converted into electrical signals, travels along neural pathways, and gets interpreted by your brain. Sound waves enter your ears, get translated, processed, understood. Thoughts arise in response to what you're hearing and seeing. Now, where in this entire chain of events is the you that's doing the watching? Is it in your eyes? But your eyes are just biological instruments, they're doing what eyes do. Is it in your brain? But your brain is just processing information, it's doing what brains do. Is it in your thoughts? But thoughts arise on their own, you don't choose most of them. The experience of watching this video is happening. But the watcher is nowhere to be found. This is what the Buddha meant when he said the world is empty of self. Not that nothing exists, but that nothing exists in the way we think it does. We keep looking for a solid, permanent, independent self, and when we look honestly, we can't find it. What we find instead is a process. A flowing, changing, interdependent process. Let me give you another example from my own life. A few years ago, I developed a chronic pain condition in my lower back. For months, I couldn't sit comfortably, couldn't sleep through the night, couldn't go for long walks. And I remember thinking, my body is betraying me. This pain is happening to me. But then, during a particularly sleepless night, I had a strange realization. I was lying there, focusing on the pain, and I noticed something. The pain wasn't a single, solid thing. It was a collection of sensations, a burning here, a throbbing there, a tightness somewhere else. And each of these sensations was constantly changing. Arising, peaking, fading. None of them lasted. None of them were solid. And more importantly, I could observe these sensations. If I was observing them, I couldn't be them. There was something in me that was aware of the pain, separate from the pain itself. This is where it gets interesting. The Buddha wasn't saying you don't exist. He was saying what you think you are, this solid, permanent self that things happen to. That's the illusion. What you actually are is something much bigger, much more mysterious, and much more free. The pain was real. The sensations were real. But the me that was suffering, that was a construction. Let me tell you about my friend Patricia. Patricia is an artist, and she has this beautiful vintage ring collection. Antique silver, old family heirlooms, pieces she's collected from estate sales over decades. These rings mean everything to her. About 2 years ago, she lost her favorite ring. It was her grandmother's wedding band, a simple gold band from 1923. She looked everywhere. Under the couch, in the car, through every pocket, every drawer. Nothing. She was devastated. She cried for days. She told me it felt like she'd lost a part of her grandmother all over again. 6 months later, she found it. It had slipped behind a dresser drawer, wedged in a crack so small she'd never thought to look there. She called me immediately, overjoyed. I found it. It was there the whole time. But here's what I asked her. Patricia, when the ring was behind the dresser, and you didn't know where it was, and you thought it was gone forever, was it still your ring? She paused. Well, yes. It was still mine. I just didn't have it. Okay. But if it was still yours, then what did you actually lose? She thought about this for a long time. What Patricia lost wasn't the ring. The ring was right there, 3 feet away, the whole time. What she lost was her relationship to the ring. She lost the experience of wearing it, of looking at it, of knowing exactly where it was. She lost the sense of security that came from having it in its proper place. The ring itself was empty. What gave it meaning was the web of relationships, her memories of her grandmother, the pleasure of wearing something beautiful, the sense of continuity that comes from owning an heirloom. When that web was disrupted, the ring might as well have not existed. This is the second layer of emptiness. Not just that the self is empty of independent existence, but that things are empty too. Think about anything you own. Your phone. Your car. Your favorite mug. What makes it yours? What gives it value? It's not the object itself, it's the stories attached to it, the memories, the utility, the social meaning. Change the relationships, and the object changes. A gold ring in a museum is just a historical artifact. A gold ring on your grandmother's finger is a symbol of love and commitment. A gold ring in a pawn shop is just collateral. Same ring. Different relationships. Different meaning. The ring is empty of any fixed, independent essence. Its entire existence is relational. Now we need to talk about Nagarjuna. If the Buddha was the one who first pointed to emptiness, Nagarjuna was the one who took that pointing and turned it into a philosophical laser beam. Nagarjuna lived in India in the 2nd century. He was a brilliant philosopher, but more than that, he was a spiritual master who saw something so profound that it's still being debated and explored almost 2,000 years later. Here's what he saw. The Buddha said there's no independent self. Nagarjuna added, there are no independent things either. And he meant nothing. Let me use an example that might help. There's a tree in my old neighborhood in Portland, a massive old oak that's been there for over 100 years. Kids climb it. Lovers carve their initials into it. Old people sit on the bench beneath it and feed the squirrels. Everyone knows that tree. But here's the question, what is that tree? Is it the trunk? But the trunk depends on the roots. Is it the roots? But the roots depend on the soil. Is it the soil? But the soil depends on microorganisms, on rain, on the minerals left by glaciers thousands of years ago. Is it the leaves? But the leaves depend on sunlight, on carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, on the specific angle of the sun in that particular spot. The tree doesn't exist independently. It exists in relationship to everything else. Without the sun, no tree. Without the rain, no tree. Without the microorganisms in the soil, no tree. Without the specific history of that piece of land, no tree. Without the humans who haven't cut it down, no tree. So where does the tree begin and end? Does it include the soil clinging to its roots? Does it include the squirrels living in its branches? Does it include the oxygen it's releasing? Does it include the childhood memories of everyone who ever climbed it? You see the problem. The tree isn't a thing. It's a process. It's a temporarily stable pattern in an endless flow of causes and conditions. Nagarjuna would say the tree is empty. Not empty of existence, but empty of independent existence. It exists, but only relationally. Only interdependently. And here's where it gets really interesting. Nagarjuna said this applies to everything. Your thoughts. Your emotions. Your relationships. Your career. Your country. Your identity. Everything you can point to and name. It's all empty of independent existence. Nothing stands alone. I once worked with a couple, Sarah and David. They'd been married for 12 years, and they were stuck in a pattern that was destroying them both. Sarah would get anxious about money. She'd start making comments about their spending, about David's habit of buying expensive coffee equipment, about how they needed to save more. David would feel criticized and controlled. He'd withdraw, stop talking, spend more time at work. Sarah would feel abandoned and unloved. She'd get more anxious, more critical. David would withdraw further. Round and round. When they came to me, each of them blamed the other. Sarah said David was emotionally unavailable. David said Sarah was controlling and never satisfied. And here's what I pointed out to them. Sarah, when you get anxious, what happens inside you? She thought about it. I feel this tightness in my chest. I start thinking about all the worst-case scenarios. I feel like I need to do something, to fix something. And David, when Sarah gets anxious and starts making comments, what happens inside you? I feel attacked. I feel like I'm not good enough. I just want to get away. Do you see what's happening? Sarah's anxiety triggers David's sense of inadequacy. David's withdrawal triggers Sarah's sense of abandonment. You're not two separate people having a conflict. You're one system, one pattern, one dance. Neither of you is the problem. The problem is the relationship between you. They looked at each other, and I could see something shift. This is interdependence at the level of human relationships. Sarah's anxiety and David's withdrawal don't exist independently. They co-create each other. Each one feeds the other. You can't point to one and say, this is the cause. The cause is the relationship itself. And here's the hopeful part. If the problem is relational, the solution is also relational. Change one part of the pattern, and the whole thing changes. If Sarah responds to her anxiety differently, maybe by sharing it vulnerably instead of criticizing, David might respond differently. If David responds to criticism differently, maybe by staying present instead of withdrawing, Sarah might feel less abandoned and less anxious. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is permanent. Everything is in motion, always, and that means change is always possible. I want to tell you about a man named Robert who came to a meditation retreat I was helping with. Robert had been meditating for about 3 years, and he was frustrated. More than frustrated, he was angry. My mind is a disaster, he told me. I sit down to meditate, and it's just chaos. Thoughts everywhere. I can't focus for more than a few seconds. I've been doing this for 3 years, and nothing has changed. My mind is still a mess. I asked him to show me. So he sat down, closed his eyes, and tried to meditate. And sure enough, after about 10 seconds, his eyes popped open. See? It's impossible. My mind is broken. I said, Robert, let me ask you something. When you sit down to meditate, what are you trying to do? I'm trying to quiet my mind. I'm trying to stop the thoughts. And how's that working? Obviously, not well. Okay. Now tell me something else. When you notice that you're thinking. When you have that moment of realizing, oh, I'm thinking again, what happens in that moment? He thought about it. Well, I guess I'm not thinking in that moment. I'm noticing. Exactly. In that moment of noticing, there's awareness. And that awareness isn't thinking. It's aware of thinking. So if you can be aware of thinking, you're not your thoughts. You're something else. Something that can observe thoughts without being them. Robert looked confused. So, my mind isn't broken. Your mind is doing exactly what minds do. It produces thoughts. That's its job. The problem isn't the thoughts. The problem is that you believe you are your thoughts. You believe the thinking is you. And then you try to fight yourself, which is impossible. You can't fight yourself. But you can stop identifying with yourself. This is the emptiness of thoughts. Thoughts arise. They appear in awareness, hang around for a while, and then dissolve. They're like clouds passing through the sky. But we grab onto them. We say, this thought is true. This thought is me. This thought matters. And then we suffer. But here's the thing Robert discovered over the next few days. When he stopped trying to fight his thoughts and simply observed them, when he stopped identifying with them, they started to lose their power. They'd arise, he'd notice them, and they'd pass. And in the spaces between thoughts, he'd find something else. Something quiet. Something peaceful. Something that had been there the whole time, hidden behind the noise. That something is awareness itself. And awareness is empty. Empty of thoughts. Empty of identity. Empty of all the content that usually fills it. But not empty of being. It's full of being. It's just not full of the stuff we usually mistake for ourselves. This next story is one I've hesitated to tell because it's personal and it still hurts. But I think it's important. My grandmother, Elena, developed Alzheimer's in her late 80s. Over about 5 years, we watched her disappear. At first, it was small things, forgetting names, misplacing things. Then it got worse. She forgot my mother's name. She forgot she had children. She forgot where she grew up, what she did for a living, the stories she'd told 100 times. Near the end, she forgot how to speak. She would sit in her chair, looking out the window, completely silent. She didn't recognize anyone. She didn't respond to her name. She didn't seem to know where she was or when it was. My mother was devastated. She's gone, she'd say. That's not even her anymore. And I understood. The grandmother we knew. The one with the sharp wit and the memory for every family story, the one who made the best pierogi in the city, the one who could tell you exactly what happened at every wedding and funeral for the past 70 years, that person was gone. But here's what I noticed when I sat with her. She would still reach out and touch my hand sometimes. She would still smile at the sunlight coming through the window. She would still react to music, tapping her fingers slightly when certain songs played. Something was still there. Something that wasn't memory or language or identity. Something that was just presence. One day, I was sitting with her, holding her hand, and I said, "Grandma, I'm here. I don't know if you know who I am, but I'm here with you." And she turned her head and looked at me. Really looked. And for just a moment, there was something in her eyes. Not recognition of me as her grandson, that was gone. But something else. Recognition of another being. Connection at a level deeper than memory. I realized something in that moment. Everything we think we are, our memories, our identities, our relationships, our stories, it can all be stripped away. And something remains. Something that was there before all of it. Something that will be there after. The Buddhists call this Buddha nature. It's not something you have. It's something you are. It's the awareness that's always present, always awake, always connected, even when everything else is gone. My grandmother taught me that. She taught me that the self we think we are is fragile and temporary. But what we actually are, the awareness that witnesses all of it, that's not fragile at all. That was there before Alzheimer's. That was there during Alzheimer's. And when her body finally stopped, that didn't go anywhere. It can't go anywhere. It was never in the body to begin with. Let me tell you about Dr. James Harlow, a neuroscientist at a major university. James spent his career studying the brain. He knew everything about neurons and synapses, about the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, about how memories form and how consciousness arises. But James had a secret. Despite all his knowledge, he was deeply unhappy. He'd gone through 2 divorces. He was estranged from his children. He drank too much. He couldn't figure out why someone who understood the brain so well couldn't fix his own. One night, after a particularly bad argument with his daughter on the phone, James sat in his office and did something he'd never done before. He turned off all his equipment. He turned off the lights. He just sat there in the dark. And he started paying attention to what was happening inside him. He noticed the tightness in his chest. He noticed the thoughts circling. I'm a failure, I've ruined everything, she'll never forgive me. He noticed the urge to reach for the bottle in his bottom drawer. He noticed all of it. And then he noticed something else. Something that was aware of all of it. Something that was watching the tightness, watching the thoughts, watching the urge. Something that wasn't tight, wasn't thinking, wasn't wanting. For the first time in his life, James experienced himself not as the contents of his mind, but as the awareness in which those contents appeared. He later told me, I spent 30 years studying the brain, and I never once asked who was doing the studying. I was so focused on the object of awareness that I completely missed awareness itself. This is the great blind spot of modern psychology. We study thoughts, emotions, behaviors, brain states. But we rarely study the one who's studying. We rarely turn awareness back on itself. When James finally did, everything changed. Not because his problems disappeared, they didn't, not immediately. But because he stopped being identical with his problems. The problems were still there, but there was space around them. They weren't crushing him anymore. This is what emptiness offers. Not the elimination of your difficulties, but a new relationship to them. You stop being the difficulty and start being the space in which the difficulty arises. And space isn't bothered by what appears in it. My niece Maya is 17. Like most teenagers, she lives partly in the real world and partly on social media. And like most teenagers, she struggles with the gap between those 2 worlds. One day, she showed me her phone. Look, she said. This is me. I looked at her profile. Beautiful photos. Perfect angles. Clever captions. Thousands of likes. Then she showed me something else. Her private journal. This is also me, she said. The journal was full of doubt, insecurity, loneliness. Questions about whether anyone really liked her. Fears about the future. Moments of deep sadness that didn't show up anywhere in her perfect online presence. Which one is real? She asked me. I thought about it for a long time before answering. Maya, what if neither of them is real? What if they're both just versions of you that appear in different contexts? She looked confused. What do you mean? Think about it. When you're posting on social media, you're creating a version of yourself that exists in that world. It's real in the sense that it's really there. People really see it. It really affects how they think about you. But it's not the whole picture. It's not the only picture. And when you're writing in your journal, you're creating another version of yourself. The private self. The vulnerable self. That's also real. But it's also not the whole picture. So which one is the real you? Neither. Both. The real you is whatever is creating all these versions. The real you is the one who's aware of the social media self and the journal self and the self that's sitting here talking to me right now. The real you is the awareness that contains all of them. Maya sat with this for a while. Then she said something that surprised me. So I don't have to be any of them. I don't have to be the perfect online person or the sad journal person. I can just be. Yes. You can just be. And from that place of just being, you can create whatever version of yourself is appropriate for whatever situation you're in. Without getting trapped in any of them. This is the freedom that emptiness offers. You don't have to be any single identity. You can be all of them, none of them, whatever is needed in the moment. Because who you really are isn't any of these passing appearances. Who you really are is the one who's aware of them all. I knew a lawyer named Patricia, different Patricia from the one with the rings. This Patricia was a corporate litigator at a top firm. She billed 2,000 hours a year. She won cases that made national news. She made partner at 34. By every external measure, she was a massive success. And she was miserable. She came to see me because she couldn't sleep. She'd lie awake at night, heart racing, mind spinning through case details, arguments, strategies. Her doctor wanted to put her on medication, but she wanted to try something else first. Tell me about your wins, I said. What do they feel like? She described it. The moment the verdict came in. The handshakes from clients. The congratulations from partners. The bottle of champagne waiting in her office. And how long does that feeling last? She thought about it. A few hours. Maybe a day. Then I'm on to the next case. And the losses? Those lasted longer. Weeks. Sometimes months. She'd replay every moment, wondering what she could have done differently. Patricia, let me ask you something. If winning gives you a feeling that lasts a day, and losing gives you a feeling that lasts months, what's the net effect over time? She laughed bitterly. I'm way behind. Exactly. You're working yourself to exhaustion for moments of relief that barely last, while the pain of not measuring up is constant. So here's my question, who would you be if you weren't winning or losing? What's left when you take away all the cases and the verdicts and the partner titles? She had no answer. Because she'd never asked herself that question. She'd spent 20 years building an identity as a successful lawyer, and she'd never considered what might exist underneath that identity. We worked together for several months. And slowly, Patricia started to discover that underneath the lawyer, underneath the success, underneath the drive to win, there was just her. A person. A human being. Someone who liked hiking and cooking and old movies. Someone who'd been neglected for so long she'd almost forgotten she existed. The cases kept coming. The wins and losses kept happening. But something had shifted. They weren't the whole story anymore. They were just part of the story. And the part that was telling the story, that was something else entirely. This next story comes from a monastery in Thailand where I spent some time years ago. There was an older monk there, Ajahn Chanda, who'd been ordained for over 40 years. He was known for being kind but also a bit forgetful. He'd walk into a room and forget why he'd come. He'd start a sentence and lose track halfway through. One day, a younger monk came to him with a problem. Ajahn, I've been meditating for 10 years, and I feel like I'm getting nowhere. My mind is still restless. I still get angry. I still crave things. What am I doing wrong? Ajahn Chanda looked at him with this gentle expression. Tell me, he said, when you're meditating, who is it that's meditating? The young monk was confused. What do you mean? I'm meditating. Me. And who is this me? Well, it's me. The person who's trying to meditate. Ajahn Chanda smiled. Let me tell you a story. This morning, I was supposed to lead the chanting. I walked to the hall, sat down, opened the book, and realized I'd forgotten my glasses. So I went back to my hut to get them. But when I got to my hut, I couldn't remember why I'd come. I stood there for 5 minutes, trying to remember. Finally, I gave up and went back to the hall. When I sat down, I saw my glasses. They'd been there the whole time, on the table next to the book. The young monk waited, not understanding. You see, Ajahn Chanda continued, you're looking for something that's already here. You're trying to become something you already are. All this effort, all this striving, it's like me walking back and forth looking for my glasses while they're sitting right in front of me. But I don't feel enlightened, the young monk protested. I feel exactly the same as I always have. Of course you do. Because the one who feels enlightened or unenlightened, that's not who you are. That's just another feeling. Another thought. Another appearance. Who you are is the one who notices all of this. And that one has never been unenlightened. It can't be. It's what enlightenment is. This is the paradox at the heart of emptiness. You can't become what you already are. You can only stop pretending you're something else. My friend Ricardo is a painter. A real one. The kind who struggles for years, whose work hangs in galleries, who thinks about color and form the way the rest of us think about groceries and traffic. One day, I visited his studio. He was standing in front of a blank canvas, just staring at it. He'd been there for 2 hours, he told me. Couldn't start. What's wrong? I asked. It's too open, he said. Too many possibilities. I can do anything, and that's paralyzing. When the canvas is blank, Every mark I make feels like a commitment. Like I'm closing doors. I thought about this. So the emptiness of the canvas is the problem? Yes. Exactly. But Ricardo, without that emptiness, you couldn't create anything. If the canvas were already full, already determined, already complete, there'd be no room for your vision. The emptiness isn't the obstacle. It's the condition for creation. He looked at the canvas differently after that. The blankness wasn't an absence. It was a presence. It was possibility itself. This is emptiness. Not nothing. Not void. Not absence. It's the open space that allows anything to appear. It's the silence that makes music possible. It's the stillness that allows movement to be noticed. It's the background without which no foreground could exist. Your mind is the same way. It's empty. That's why thoughts can appear in it. If it were already full, already determined, already complete, nothing new could ever arise. You'd be stuck forever with whatever was already there. But because your mind is empty, it's infinitely creative. Infinitely receptive. Infinitely open. The problem isn't that your mind is empty. The problem is that you keep trying to fill it with things that won't stay filled. You keep trying to make it solid, permanent, certain. And it keeps slipping through your fingers because that's not what it is. Let your mind be empty. Let it be open. Let it be the space in which all of life appears and disappears. That's what it's always been. That's what it always will be. I want to tell you about a man named Michael. Michael was the CEO of a tech company that went public in the late 1990s. At the peak, he was worth over $50 million. He had houses in 3 states, a yacht, a collection of classic cars, and more attention from the media than he knew what to do with. Then the dot-com bubble burst. His company's stock went from over $100 to less than $1. In the space of about 18 months, he lost everything. The houses were foreclosed. The yacht was repossessed. His wife left him. His friends stopped calling. Michael ended up in a small apartment, working as a consultant for a fraction of what he used to make. And he was miserable. Not because of the circumstances, he could adapt to the circumstances. But because of what the circumstances meant to him. I'm a failure, he told me. I had everything, and I lost it all. I'm nothing now. I asked him a question that seemed simple but wasn't. Michael, when you had $50 million, were you happy? He thought about it. I thought I was. But looking back, no. I was always worried about losing it. Always comparing myself to guys who had more. Always stressed about the next deal, the next quarter, the next threat. And now? Now I'm not worried about losing anything because there's nothing left to lose. But I feel like I've disappeared. Like without the money, without the company, without the status, I don't exist. Michael, who would you be if you took away all the things you've lost? If you took away the money, the houses, the cars, the title, the respect, what's left? He sat there for a long time. Then he said something I'll never forget. I don't know. I've never asked that question. I've spent my whole life becoming something, and I never stopped to ask what I already was. This is the trap of attachment. We attach to things, money, status, relationships, identities, because we think they make us real. We think without them, we'd be nothing. But here's the truth those things reveal: they're not making you real. They're covering up the reality that's already there. Michael spent the next few years exploring that question. Who was he without all the things he'd lost? And slowly, painfully, beautifully, he started to discover that underneath all the acquisitions and achievements, there was a person. A person who liked hiking and reading history books and helping young entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes he'd made. A person who could be happy with much less because he'd finally found what couldn't be lost. I was visiting a friend in the hospital a few years ago. She'd just had surgery, and I was sitting with her in the recovery room, trying to keep her mind off the pain. The room was quiet except for the beeping of monitors and the soft footsteps of nurses. And I started noticing the other patients in the room, separated only by curtains. There was an elderly man whose family was gathered around his bed, speaking in hushed voices. There was a young woman with her mother, both of them crying quietly. There was a middle-aged man alone, staring at the ceiling. And I had this strange realization. Every person in that room, every single one, was facing the same thing. Illness. Vulnerability. The fragility of the body. The uncertainty of life. The rich and the poor, the successful and the struggling, the loved and the lonely. All of them, in this moment, equal. The man who'd built a business from nothing. The woman who'd raised 3 children alone. The teenager who'd just been in a car accident. The executive who'd postponed every vacation for 20 years. All of them, in this room, stripped of everything except their bare humanity. And in that stripping away, something became visible. Something that's always there but usually hidden. The simple, irreducible fact of being alive. Of being conscious. Of being present. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once wrote that the wave doesn't have to die to become water. It already is water. It just doesn't know it. In that hospital room, I saw waves crashing everywhere. Different shapes, different sizes, different trajectories. But all of them water. All of them made of the same stuff. All of them, in their essence, not separate at all. This is what emptiness reveals. Not that the waves don't exist, but that their existence as separate waves is only part of the story. The deeper story is the water. And the water doesn't have a problem with any of it. The water isn't afraid. The water doesn't worry about dying. The water just is, whether it's appearing as a tiny ripple or a massive tsunami. We are the water. We just keep thinking we're the wave. My nephew Jason, Maya's younger brother, went through a phase in high school where he was obsessed with happiness. He read self-help books. He listened to podcasts. He tried gratitude journals and meditation apps and positive affirmations. He wanted so badly to be happy. And the more he tried, the less happy he became. One day, he called me, frustrated. "Nothing works," he said. "I do all this stuff, and I still feel anxious and depressed half the time. What's wrong with me?" "Jason, let me ask you something. When you try to be happy, what are you actually doing?" "I'm trying to feel good. I'm trying to have positive thoughts and emotions instead of negative ones." "And how's that going?" "Not well. The negative ones keep coming anyway. And then I feel worse because I'm failing at being happy. Exactly. You're in a war with your own mind. You're trying to get rid of half of your experience. And you can't win that war. You can't selectively edit your experience. The negative stuff is going to show up whether you want it to or not. So what am I supposed to do? Just be miserable? No. You're supposed to stop fighting. You're supposed to let everything be there, the good, the bad, the ugly, and notice that underneath all of it, there's something that isn't bothered. There's something that can watch it all without being destroyed by any of it. I told him about a study I'd read. Researchers gave people an iPod and told them to listen to a happy playlist whenever they felt sad. The result? They ended up more depressed than people who just let themselves feel sad. Because the message they were sending themselves was, "My sadness is unacceptable. I have to fix it." And that message, the rejection of their own experience, was worse than the sadness itself. Jason started experimenting with a different approach. When anxiety showed up, he'd say, "Oh, there's anxiety. Hello, anxiety." When sadness showed up, he'd say, "Oh, there's sadness. Hello, sadness." He stopped trying to push them away. He just let them be there. And something strange happened. They didn't last as long. They didn't hurt as much. They came and went like weather, and underneath them, something remained steady. Something that wasn't anxious or sad. Something that was just aware. This is the emptiness of emotions. They're not you. They're just visitors. They appear in you, but they're not you. And when you stop treating them like enemies, they stop acting like enemies. They just pass through, like clouds through an empty sky. I studied philosophy in college. I loved it. I loved the arguments, the logic, the way you could take an idea and turn it over and over until you'd examined every angle. But somewhere along the way, I hit a wall. I realized that for every argument, there was a counter-argument. For every position, there was a convincing opposition. The more I thought about things, the less certain I became. Philosophy, which was supposed to lead me to truth, seemed to lead me only to more questions. One of my professors, an older man named Dr. Rosen, noticed my frustration. He called me into his office one day. "You're trying to think your way to certainty," he said. "But that's not how it works. Thinking can only take you so far. At some point, you have to stop thinking and just see." See what? See that all your thinking is happening within something. All your arguments, all your logic, all your certainties and uncertainties, they're all appearances in consciousness. They're all objects that arise and pass away. But the consciousness in which they appear, that's not an object. You can't think about it because it's what's doing the thinking. You can only be it. I didn't understand at the time. But I've come to understand since. All our philosophies, all our religions, all our worldviews, they're maps. Useful maps, sometimes beautiful maps, but never the territory itself. And the mistake we make is confusing the map with the territory. We think if we just have the right map, we'll know where we are. But no map can ever capture the full reality of the place. The place is infinitely more complex, more alive, more mysterious than any representation of it. This is the emptiness of views. Not that all views are false, but that all views are incomplete. All views are partial. All views are pointers, not destinations. The Buddha himself, when asked about the deepest truths, often remained silent. Not because he didn't know, but because he knew that any answer would be misunderstood. Any answer would be taken as another view, another map, another concept to cling to. And the truth can't be clung to. It can only be lived. My friend Rachel is a nurse in the intensive care unit of a major hospital. She's been doing this work for over 20 years. She's seen more death and suffering than most of us can imagine. A few years ago, she went through a difficult period. A patient she'd grown close to died unexpectedly. Another patient's family blamed her for a complication that wasn't her fault. She started having panic attacks at work, something that had never happened before. She came to me in desperation. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "I can't handle the intensity. I can't handle watching people die. I can't handle the families, the grief, the pressure. I need to quit." I asked her to tell me about a typical shift. She described it in detail. The constant beeping of monitors. The rushing from one emergency to another. The moments of connection with patients who were terrified. The moments of confrontation with families who were angry and scared. The exhaustion at the end of the day. And in the middle of all that, I asked, "Where are you? Who's experiencing all of this?" She thought about it. "I don't know. I'm just in it. I'm just trying to survive. Try something different. Next time you're in the middle of a crisis, see if you can find the part of you that's aware of the crisis. Not the part that's reacting, not the part that's scared, not the part that's exhausted. The part that's just watching it all happen." A few weeks later, she called me. "Something strange happened," she said. "We had a code blue, a patient's heart stopped. Everyone was rushing around, doing chest compressions, drawing up medications. And in the middle of it, I suddenly became aware of something. There was all this chaos, all this activity, all this noise. And underneath it, there was this stillness. This quiet awareness that was just watching it all. And I realized that stillness was me. Not the me that was running around, but the real me. The one that's always there, no matter what's happening." Rachel still works in the ICU. She still faces death and suffering every day. But something has shifted. The chaos is still there, but she's not lost in it anymore. She's found the still point at the center of the storm. And from that still point, she can do her work with more compassion, more presence, and less exhaustion. The still point is emptiness. It's the space in which everything happens. And once you find it, you realize it's been there all along. You just never noticed because you were too busy looking at everything else. I want to end with a story about my nephew when he was very small, maybe 4 years old. We were at a park, and he was blowing bubbles. You know those little plastic wands that create dozens of bubbles with one wave? He was fascinated. He'd blow, and the bubbles would float up, catching the light, reflecting all the colors of the rainbow. He'd chase them, try to catch them, laugh when they popped. At one point, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Where do they go?" he asked. "When they pop, where do they go?" I didn't have an answer. But the question stuck with me. Where does a bubble go when it pops? It doesn't go anywhere. It was never separate from the air. It was always air, just air arranged in a particular way, reflecting light in a particular way, floating for a brief moment before returning to its original form. The bubble doesn't die. It just stops being a bubble. But the air is still there. It was always there. It will always be there. We are the bubbles. We appear for a moment, catch the light, reflect the colors, float through this strange experience we call life. And then we pop. But what we're made of, that doesn't pop. That doesn't go anywhere. That was there before we appeared and will be there after. The Buddhists call it Buddha nature. The Hindus call it Atman. The mystics call it the God within. The scientists call it consciousness. The names don't matter. What matters is that it's real. What matters is that it's you. What matters is that you've never been separate from it, not for a single moment. The bubble doesn't have to become air. It already is air. It just doesn't know it. You don't have to become enlightened. You already are enlightened. You just don't know it. You've been looking outside yourself for something that's been inside the whole time. You've been trying to become something you already are. This is the gift of emptiness. Not that you're nothing. But that you're everything. That you're the space in which all of life appears. That you're the awareness that witnesses all experience. That you're the air that was never born and can never die, temporarily appearing as a bubble called me. 3 hours. That's how long we've been together. If you're still here, thank you. Thank you for giving this teaching your attention, your presence, your openness. We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the self that isn't there. About the things that aren't as solid as they seem. About the interdependence of all existence. About the awareness that's always present, always awake, always free. About the emptiness that isn't nothing but is everything. But here's the thing. All of this, every word, every story, every example, it's all just pointing. Pointing at something that can't be captured in words. Something you have to see for yourself. The Buddha compared his teachings to a raft. You use the raft to cross the river. But once you're on the other side, you don't carry the raft on your head. You leave it behind. The teachings are useful. They're necessary. But they're not the destination. They're the vehicle. So take these teachings. Use them. Let them challenge you, change you, open you. But don't cling to them. Don't turn them into another identity, another view, another thing to defend. Let them do their work and then let them go. What remains when all the teachings are gone? What remains when all the concepts are released? What remains when even the idea of emptiness is empty? That's for you to discover. Not in some future moment, not after more practice, not when you're more enlightened. Right now. In this very moment. What's here when you stop looking for something else? The Buddhists have a saying, the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. This video has been a finger. A long finger, admittedly. A finger that's taken 3 hours to point. But still just a finger. The moon is waiting. Not somewhere else. Not in some other time. Right here. Right now. In the silence between thoughts. In the space between breaths. In the awareness that's reading these words. You don't have to find it. You've never lost it. You don't have to become it. You've always been it. You just have to notice. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention, your openness, your willingness to explore these depths. If this content has served you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Consider supporting this work so we can continue creating long-form, deep-dive content like this. And remember, what you're looking for is looking for you. It always has been. It always will be. This is Monk's Temple. Go in peace. Go in presence. Go as the emptiness that contains everything.